Picture this. You're standing on a terrace carved into the side of a mountain. It's below freezing. The snow is falling so quietly it feels fake, like someone designed it. Inside, through giant glass walls, 200 of the most expensive people in the country are laughing, clinking glasses, and looking beautiful. And you? You just heard your ex-boyfriend introduce you to his gorgeous new girlfriend and I need you to feel how much this stings, an old friend. Not his ex, not someone important, an old friend. 6 months, 2 years of Yuspi before that, gone. Reduced to 2 words while his new girlfriend smiled politely and went back to touching his arm like she owned him. I pressed my bare hand against the frozen stone railing and just stood there. I wasn't even crying yet. I was too stunned to cry, and that's when I heard a voice behind me. Low, calm, certain. You'll lose the hand if you keep that up. I turned around and I saw her, Margot Voss, the woman who owned the mountain, all of it. Stay with me. Because what happened over the next 48 hours in that snowstorm, what she said to me, what she did, and the one thing she chose not to do that night, changed every single thing I thought I knew about what it felt like to be chosen. This is the story of Iris Calloway, and the night Margot Voss decided she wasn't leaving. Before I get into everything, I need to warn you. This story has a moment in it that I've read maybe 30 times now, and every single time, I stop breathing for about 5 full seconds. It's not the humiliation scene. It's not the storm. It's not even the kiss. It's one sentence that Margot says in the library on the second night after Iris has been crying so hard her whole body is shaking. One sentence, 11 words. And if you're someone who has ever felt invisible or reduced, or like you needed someone to just see you, really see you, not the convenient version of you, those 11 words are going to hit somewhere deep. I'm not telling you what they are yet. You'll know them when we get there. If you're new here, welcome. We tell Rosalie and Vivian GL romance stories on this channel, and we do not hold back on the emotion. Hit subscribe right now so you don't miss the next one. We upload every week, and every story is written to wreck you in the best possible way. And if you're already here, already settled in, I'm glad you stayed. Now, let's go back to the mountain. Let's go back to Iris. My name is Iris Calloway, and I want to be very clear about one thing before this story begins. I was not supposed to be there. I was not the kind of person who attended elite winter galas at mountain resorts that cost more per night than my monthly rent. I didn't own a fur coat. I didn't know what champagne tasted like above $40 a bottle. And the closest I had ever come to a black tie event was a wedding I photographed in a barn in Vermont, where the groom cried so hard during the vows that I cried too and had to excuse myself to fix my mascara behind a horse stall. I was a photographer, a freelance one. The kind who made a living doing corporate headshots, product shoots, the occasional engagement session. Good enough to be called professional, not famous enough to be called comfortable. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in the middle of January. I was sitting in my apartment eating leftover pasta and editing photos of a dental office's new equipment when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was efficient, slightly frantic, and introduced itself as belonging to the events coordinator for Voss Peak Resort. Their photographer had broken his leg on 2 days earlier. The winter gala was in 36 hours. They needed someone, now. The fee they named was 3 times what I charged for a full-day corporate shoot. I said yes before I fully understood what I was agreeing to. I found out later what the Voss Peak Winter Gala actually was. A private annual event held for the resort's most elite members, the kind of gathering that doesn't get photographed for public media. Old money, new tech money. The kind of people who wear watches that cost more than cars and don't mention it because they don't need to. And the resort itself. God, the resort itself. I drove up the mountain road in my dented rented Hyundai as snow started falling softly. And the first time Voss Peak came into view through the trees, I actually pulled over. It was built from black stone and dark wood, stretching across the mountain face like it had grown there. Every window was lit with warm gold light. The entrance was framed by tall torches, throwing orange flames against the white snow. There were no crowds, no chaos, just quiet, controlled luxury that somehow made the cold feel intentional, like the mountain itself had been curated. I sat in my rental car for a full 60 seconds. Then I parked it as far away from the other vehicles as physically possible. Because every other car in the lot was either a Tesla, a Range Rover, or something German with a hood ornament that probably cost more than my camera equipment, and I walked to the service entrance with my gear bag over my shoulder. The event's coordinator, a brisk woman named Harriet, with a headset and a clipboard that she held like a weapon, met me at the side door. She explained the evening's agenda, showed me the floor plan, told me which guests absolutely should not be photographed at all, and handed me a laminated badge on a lanyard that said media, which felt both accurate and deeply ironic, given that I had arrived in a car that smelled faintly of someone else's fast food. I found rhythm quickly, I always do. There's something about being the photographer at an event that makes you simultaneously present and invisible, and I had learned to live comfortably in that space. You move through rooms, you read people, you wait for the moment that tells the truth, not the posed smile, but the real one, the laugh that breaks through. The look someone gives across a room when they think nobody is watching. I was good at catching those. For the first 2 hours, everything was fine. I was professional. I was invisible. I was exactly what I was hired to be. And then Daniel walked in. Daniel Ashworth, my ex-boyfriend of 2 years. The man I had broken up with 7 months ago. Or rather, the man who had slowly, methodically dismantled my sense of self over 24 months, and then looked genuinely confused when I told him, on a rainy Tuesday in September, that I couldn't do it anymore. I saw him from across the ballroom, tall, polished, wearing a suit that I recognized as new, because he had never owned anything that well fitted when we were together. He was laughing at something a man beside him said, and he had that easy social confidence that always looked natural on him and always made me feel, standing next to him, like I was slightly out of focus. I told myself to stay calm. He hadn't seen me. The room was full. I could keep my distance, finish the job, and leave. I almost made it. I was moving toward the far end of the room, camera up, focused on capturing a group of older men near the fireplace, when I heard his voice directly behind me. Iris. I turned. He looked exactly like himself. That was the thing about Daniel. He never looked like anything had touched him. He smiled that easy smile, and there was genuine surprise in it. And something else. Something almost pleased, like I was a detail in the evening he hadn't expected but wasn't displeased to find. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Working," I said. I gestured to the camera. Kept my voice level. "Right, of course," he nodded. And then the woman beside him stepped forward. She was beautiful in the effortless way that very expensive beauty can look. Tall, composed, with hair that fell in a perfect dark wave over one shoulder and earrings that caught the light. She looked at me with a polite smile that was completely genuine, which somehow made it worse. "Vivienne," Daniel said, sliding his arm around her waist. "This is Iris, an old friend. She's the photographer tonight. 2 words, old friend. I don't know how my face looked in that moment. I hope it looked neutral. I think it looked like someone had just pressed something very cold against the back of my neck. Lovely to meet you," Vivienne said warmly. "You too," I said. My voice came out completely normal. I was amazed by it. Daniel said something else, some light, conversational nothing about the resort, about the gala, and I responded, and then I excused myself, because I saw a moment across the room that needed capturing, which was a lie, but it was a polite lie, and I moved away before anything in my face could betray me. I made it to the glass doors at the far end of the room. I pushed through them onto the terrace. The cold hit me like a wall, and I was grateful for it. I stood at the stone railing and pressed both hands against it. And I breathed, and I looked out at the mountain, and the dark trees, and the snow coming down in slow, quiet, perfect sheets, and I thought about the fact that I had spent years of my life loving someone who had just introduced me to the woman he replaced me with as an old friend. Not as Iris, not as someone who mattered, just.
An old friend.
Pressed my right hand flat against the stone. It was so cold it almost burned. I kept it there anyway. You'll lose the hand if you keep that up. The voice came from my left, low, unhurried, the kind of voice that had never needed to be loud on to be heard. I turned, and I saw Margot Voss for the first time. She was standing under the heat lamp at the far end of the terrace, wearing a black suit that was perfectly tailored and looked like it cost more than I made in 3 months. She had dark hair with silver, threading through it at the temples, cut clean and deliberate, and she was holding a glass of something amber that she hadn't touched. Her face was angular, composed, and completely still. She was watching me with gray eyes that didn't look cold exactly. They looked precise, like she saw things clearly, and had simply stopped pretending to be surprised by what she found. I lifted my hand off the railing. It had gone slightly numb. I was testing the structural integrity, I said, professionally. I'm a photographer, not an engineer, but I feel the skills transfer. She didn't smile. She looked at me for another moment. Then she said, "You're the replacement photographer." That's one way to put it. It's the accurate way. She moved toward me slightly, not close, just closer. Harriet said, "You arrived alone." No assistant. I usually work alone. I know, she said. I looked at your portfolio before approving the booking. Something about that landed strangely. She had looked at my work. The owner of all of this. She had looked at my photographs before agreeing to let me through the service entrance. I didn't know what to do with that, so I said nothing. She looked out at the snow for a moment. Then she asked, quietly and without any performance of sympathy, "Who was the man who made you come out here?" And somehow, maybe because she asked it so plainly, without softness or strategy, I told her. I didn't tell her everything, not then, but I told her the shape of it. Ex-boyfriend, 2 years, the introduction, the 2 words. I kept my voice even, and my hands in my pockets, and I told it the way you tell something you already processed, or at least the way you tell it when you want to sound like you've processed it. Margot Voss listened without interrupting, without nodding encouragingly, without making those small sounds people make to perform sympathy. She just stood there in the snow and listened, and her stillness didn't feel cold. It felt like the kind of attention that's actually rare, the kind that doesn't need to fill every pause with itself. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He looked smaller after he spoke to you. Not you." I blinked. "What?" When he walked away from you in there. She didn't look at me, still looking at the snow. He was carrying something, guilt or something like it. You were just carrying pain, which is cleaner. Pain at least knows what it is. I didn't know what to say to that. He called you an old friend, she continued, because the accurate word would have required him to explain something about himself he doesn't want to examine. Men like that use imprecision as a defense mechanism. She said it the way someone states a fact about weather, without heat, without contempt, just clearly. I stood there in the freezing cold and felt something strange happen in my chest. Something that was almost like relief, not because the pain was gone, but because someone had just described it accurately, had named the thing without softening it or explaining it away or telling me I'd feel better soon. "How long were you together?" she asked. "2 years. And you ended it?" "Yes." "Good," she said simply. I almost laughed. It didn't feel good. "No, but you ending it means you knew." She finally looked at me. "A lot of people don't know until too late." We stood there for another few minutes. The snow kept falling. Through the glass behind us, the gala continued. Music, laughter, clinking crystal, and it all felt very far away. Eventually I said I should go back in. "I'm supposed to be working." "You have another 4 hours," she said. "You'll have time. You know the schedule?" "I know everything about this event. It's my event." She said it without arrogance, just stating a fact the same way she stated all her facts. "Take 5 more minutes. The cold is useful sometimes." I took 5 more minutes, and then I went back inside and did my job. I was professional for the rest of the evening. Technically, I was excellent. I always work better when I'm feeling something, because emotion makes me pay attention to the light differently, to the space between people. I caught moments that night that I knew, even in the moment of pressing the shutter, were good. But I was aware of Margot Voss in the room. Not in the way you're aware of someone you're attracted to, necessarily, or not only in that way. More in the way you're aware of the source of gravity. She moved through the room with that same quality of absolute self-possession, speaking to guests with ease that managed to be warm without ever being unguarded. She didn't perform charm. She just offered attention, and people leaned into it without knowing why. Daniel was there too, of course. I saw him several more times. He looked at me once from across the room, a long, complicated look that I recognized from years of knowing his face. It was the look he got when he was calculating something, when he was deciding how he felt about something, rather than actually feeling it. I didn't hold the look. I turned my camera to a different part of the room. Around 11 o'clock, the weather got worse. I found out from Harriet that the road down the mountain had been closed as a precaution. A sudden drop in temperature had turned the surface to ice. The resort was handling it. The guests who were staying on site were fine. The guests who had planned to leave were being reassigned to rooms. I was not a guest. I had a rental car in the parking lot and a 40-minute drive to the nearest town at the bottom of the mountain, where I'd booked a cheap motel room. I found a quiet corner and did the math. I could wait it out. Roads sometimes cleared after a few hours. I could sit in the staff lounge, finish editing the first batch of images, and leave by 2 or 3 in the morning. That was the plan. Then Daniel found me. He came around the corner of the silent auction corridor with a glass of wine in each hand and that careful, deliberate ease he deployed when he wanted to seem casual and wasn't. He offered me one of the glasses. I didn't take it. I wanted to apologize for earlier. The old friend thing, that came out wrong. How did it come out right in your head? I asked. I kept my voice pleasant. He had the grace to wince slightly. You're right. I didn't know how to introduce you. It was unexpected. You could have introduced me as Iris, I said. That would have worked. I lifted the camera slightly. And the roads are closed, so I'm going to go find a place to sit and keep working. Enjoy the rest of your night. I turned to walk away. I still think about you, he said to my back. I stopped. Not because it moved me. I want to be honest about that. I stopped because I recognized the sentence. Recognized it as something he said when he wanted to retake ground, when he felt control slipping, when someone stopped making themselves available to manage his discomfort. He had said some version of it before. The words were real in the way that convenient feelings are real. I turned back, and Margot Voss was standing at the end of the corridor. I don't know if she had been there the whole time, or if she had just arrived. She was holding a glass of water, not wine, and she was looking at Daniel with an expression of such complete and pleasant neutrality that it was more cutting than anything aggressive could have been. Mr. Ashworth, she said, I believe the Kellerman Group is looking for you in the East Lounge. They had some questions about the spring booking. The dismissal was so perfectly executed that Daniel was holding his wine glass and nodding and walking away before I think he fully processed that he had been dismissed. Margot watched him go. Then she looked at me. The staff lounge is on the 3rd floor, she said. You can use the corner office off the main hallway if you need quiet for editing. The connection is better. You don't need to. I know I don't need to, she said. The offer stands. She walked past me toward the main hall. I stood there for a moment. Then I followed. The office was small and dark and warm, with a window that looked out directly at the mountain face and the snow and still coming down in the dark. There was a desk, a leather chair, a standing lamp in the corner that gave out amber light, and a shelf of books along one wall that had the particular quality of books that have actually been read. I set up my laptop, connected to the network, and started sorting images. It was good work. Even in my current state, looking at the files as they came in, I could see that the evening had produced some genuinely strong photographs. The light in that ballroom was remarkable. The combination of warm firelight and the cool blue coming through the tall windows in the east end created this natural contrast that made everything look like it had been deliberately lit. I worked for about 90 minutes. I heard the door open at some point, a quiet knock first, and Margot entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one on the desk beside my laptop without asking if I wanted it, pulled the other chair from the corner, and sat down at an angle from me. She opened something on her own phone. She didn't speak. We sat in comfortable silence for what must have been 40 minutes. It was one of the stranger experiences I'd had in recent memory, sitting in near silence with someone I had met 3 hours ago, in an office on a snowbound mountain, both of us just working. And it felt natural, not awkward, not performance. Just two people occupying the same quiet space. Eventually, I said, "How often do you come to the gala?" "Every year," she said. "My parents started it. I kept it going. Do you like it?" She considered the question. "I like what it means to the people who come back every year. There's a couple, the Fentons, who have been attending since the first one. They got engaged here. 33 years ago now." She paused. "I like being the person who holds the space for things like that. But not the event itself." She looked at me. A slight thing at the corner of her mouth that wasn't quite a smile but was adjacent to one. "I find large social gatherings exhausting," she said plainly. "I'm very good at them. That doesn't mean I enjoy them." I looked back at my screen. "Me too. I know," she said. "I could tell by how you move in a room. You observe more than you participate. You find a position and you work from it. That's just photography." "No," she said. "That's a particular relationship with the world. Photography just gave you a frame for it." I looked at her again. She was back on her phone, calm as still water. I went back to my images. Around 2 in the morning, Harriet knocked and stuck her head in to update us on the road situation. Still closed. The temperature had continued to drop. The earliest realistic estimate for safe travel was 7 a.m. She apologized to me specifically, said the resort would of course cover any costs, and offered me a guest room. I said that was fine, thank you, and she disappeared. "The East Wing rooms are adequate," Margot said. "Harriet will have given you a good one." "Have you been listening to every conversation I've had tonight?" I asked. "Only the ones in my building," she said. "Which is all of them. I should have found that unsettling. For some reason, I didn't. I finished my initial edit around 3 a.m. The images were good. Several of them were better than good. I closed the laptop. Margot looked up. "Thank you," I said, "for the office and the coffee. And the earlier thing in the corridor." "The earlier thing," she repeated. "With Daniel." She was quiet for a moment. "He was bothering you. I had a reason to send him elsewhere." She paused. Both things were true. I nodded. I stood up to gather my things. And then I don't know exactly why I said it. Maybe it was 2 in the morning and I was tired and the snow was still falling outside and the warmth of the room had loosened something in my chest that I'd been holding tightly for 7 months. I said he was the first person I ever really let in, and he just never looked at me like I was important. Not really. Not the way I wanted to be. And I kept thinking, if I just made myself more useful, more easy, more quiet, he'd eventually see me. And he never did. I wasn't crying, I was just saying it, factually. Into the warm quiet of the small office on the mountain. Margot was very still. Then she said, "I believe you." Just that. 2 words. Quiet and certain. "I believe you." Not, "That must have been so hard." Not, "You deserve better." Not, "He didn't deserve you." Just, "I believe you." As in, I hear what you said. I accept it as true. You don't have to convince me. I stood there for a moment with my bag on my shoulder. "Good night," I said. "Good night, Iris," she said, using my name for the first time. I went to my room in the East Wing. I lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling, and I did not think about Daniel Ashworth even once. We're just getting started. If you're listening to this right now and you feel something shifting in your chest, that slight ache of recognition. I want you to stay with it. Because this story is about to take you somewhere you didn't expect. Quick favor before we go further. If this story is hitting right, drop a comment. Even just the word mountain, it tells me you're here and it helps this channel more than you know. Now, the storm continues, and so does Iris. I woke up at 8 to pale winter light coming through the curtains, and the sound of someone sliding a tray outside my door. Breakfast. Actual breakfast. Not a continental buffet situation, but a proper tray with coffee and a small pot of something that turned out to be excellent oatmeal, with apple and brown sugar, and a note from the kitchen that said the road was expected to clear by 10. I ate it sitting cross-legged on the bed, looking out at the mountain. The snow had stopped. Everything was white and still and extraordinarily quiet. I showered, got dressed, packed my things, and went downstairs. The resort was in that particular morning mode of a place recovering from a large event. Staff moving efficiently, tables being cleared, the last guests in various states of farewell. I walked through the main lobby toward the exit, intending to find Harriet, settle the remaining logistics, retrieve my very unglamorous car, and leave. I ran into Daniel instead. He was in the lobby with Vivienne, their luggage being handled by staff. Vivienne was on her phone. Daniel saw me first. He crossed to me before I could redirect. Iris. His voice was different from last night. Less calculated. Tired around the edges, the way people get when they've slept badly and their social energy hasn't fully restocked. I meant what I said last night. I do think about you. I looked at him. I had loved him for 2 years. I had reshaped myself around the edges of what he seemed to need, gotten quieter when my opinions annoyed him, gotten smaller when my ambitions made him uncomfortable, told myself that his version of love was just practical, just realistic, and that I was being romantic and unreasonable to want something more tangible than tolerance. I had ended it on a rainy Tuesday and cried for 6 weeks, and slowly, painfully rebuilt my sense of what I was worth. And now here he was, at 8:30 in the morning, in a luxury mountain resort lobby, telling me he thought about me. Because Vivienne was on her phone and I was present and available and he was in a mood. I think you think about what I represented, I said. Not cruelly, just clearly. A version of yourself you were comfortable with. Someone who made things easy. He opened his mouth. Have a drive down, I said. I walked past him. And I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I didn't need to press my hand against anything cold. I just walked. Harriet found me near the side entrance and handed me an envelope. The payment, plus a generous addition for the road delay inconvenience, plus a handwritten note in clean, sharp handwriting that said, "Your photographs from last night were exceptional. The one of the Fentons, table 7, east window, is the best image from this event in 15 years. I would like to speak with you again when you're back in the city. M." Voss. There was a business card clipped to the note. I stood there in the side entrance with the card in my hand, and the cold coming in through the door someone had propped open, and I read the note twice. Then I put the card in the inside pocket of my jacket, close to where my heart was. I drove down the mountain in my dented rental car with the heater running full blast and the radio off. I thought about "I believe you." I thought about "he looked smaller after he spoke to you." Not you. I thought about the coffee appearing without a question, and the silence that felt like company, and gray eyes that saw clearly and didn't pretend to see less. I thought about the card against my chest. The road curved, and the mountain disappeared in my rearview mirror, and I drove back toward the city. I did not call her for 8 days. Not because I didn't want to, because I was terrified of what I wanted. I had spent 2 years making myself smaller to fit into someone else's life. And here was this woman who occupied space the way the mountain itself did, completely, without apology, without needing the space validated. And something in me recognized that. Something in me reached toward it, which meant something in me was ready to get hurt again if I wasn't careful. On the 8th day, at 7 p.m., sitting in my apartment with a cup of tea going cold beside me and a new editing project open on my screen, I took the card out of the inside pocket of my jacket where I had left it. I looked at her name. Then I picked up my phone. She answered on the second ring. Iris, she said. Not a question. She knew. The number, presumably, or just the timing. The way she knew things. Hi, I said, extremely articulate. Very impressive start. You waited 8 days, she said. Not accusatory, just noting. I was thinking, what did you decide? I looked at the card still in my hand, her name in clean dark print. That I'd like to see you again, I said. And that I want to be honest about the fact that I don't entirely know what that means. I'm not I'm not in a place where I have everything figured out. I'm still putting some things back together. But I didn't want to not call. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable. The kind of pause that means someone is giving real consideration to what you just said. I appreciate that, she said. The honesty, I'm trying to practice it. I can tell. Another pause. I'm in the city next week, Wednesday through Friday. If you're free Wednesday evening, there's a gallery showing I have to attend. Nominally. I find them more bearable with company. I almost smiled. Nominally. I'll make no pretense that I want to go. I want to go if you're there. The directness of it landed somewhere warm. Wednesday, I said. Yes, we met for the gallery on Wednesday. It was a small photography exhibition, which was either a coincidence or deliberate, and knowing Margot, I had my suspicions, in a narrow gallery in the Arts District. She was waiting outside when I arrived, hands in the pockets of her coat, watching the street with that characteristic stillness. She looked different outside the resort context. Not less herself more, somehow. The mountain had a frame, a context. Here in the city, in ordinary winter light, she was just a person standing on a sidewalk, and that felt more revealing, not less. You're early, I said. I'm always early, she said. Being late requires optimism about time that I don't have. We went inside. The photographs were good. Landscape work, mostly. Someone who shot ice and stone, and the kind of desolate, beautiful terrain that makes you feel the scale of the world. We moved through the exhibition slowly, and I noticed that she looked at each image with that same quality of full attention, not rushing, not performing appreciation, just actually looking. This one, I said at some point, stopping in front of a photograph of a frozen lake at dusk, the ice surface catching the last of the light in pale blues and silvers. Yes, she agreed immediately. She looked at it for a long moment. It's honest. There's no attempt to make it prettier than it is. The cold is real in it. That's what I always try to do, I said. Make the real thing visible, not the improved version of it. She looked at me sideways. Is that a philosophy or a habit? Both, I think. We had dinner after. A quiet place, not expensive in a showy way, just good. The kind of restaurant that focused on food rather than atmosphere. We talked for 3 hours. About photography, about the resort and what she'd built there, about her parents and the event they'd created, about what I wanted to do with my work, where I wanted it to go. She asked real questions, the kind that required you to actually think. Not what kind of photography do you do, but what do you want people to feel when they look at your work? Not think, feel. I had to sit with that one for a moment. Safe, I said finally. I want people to feel like what they're seeing is true, and that true things are safe to look at. Even the difficult ones. She was quiet for a moment, then, that's what I thought. We walked back toward the gallery street afterward. The city was cold and bright. She was beside me without touching me, and the proximity was precise somehow. Close enough to feel, far enough to be a choice rather than an accident. At the corner where our routes divided, she stopped. I'd like to see you again, she said. I'd like that too, I said. She looked at me for a moment, that steady, clear look. I want to be equally honest with you, she said. I find you very interesting, not in a general way, in a specific way, and I intend to pursue that at whatever pace works for you. I'm not in a hurry, and I don't have any interest in moving faster than you're ready for. My heart was doing something complicated. I started. Direct, she said. I know. I'm told it can be a lot. No, I said. It's not a lot. It's just not what I'm used to. I know, she said quietly. That's why I said it. She said goodnight. She walked away. I stood on the corner in the cold city air and watched her go, and I felt something happening in my chest that was not fear. Or maybe it was fear and something else, layered together, indistinguishable. I took out my phone. I sent her a message. It said, Wednesday was good. Thursday would be too, if you're free. Her reply came in 45 seconds. It said, Thursday it is. You're halfway through this story, and I promise you, the second half is where it gets real. Because everything up to now has been careful, measured, two people moving towards something and being honest about it. But careful only lasts so long before life gets involved. Before old wounds do what old wounds always do. If this story is landing for you, share it with someone who needs it tonight. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe. Because the next story we're telling is, honestly, even better than this one. Now, back to Iris, back to Margot, and the night that everything accelerated. 3 weeks, Thursday happened. Friday happened. The following week happened. We fell into something that was not quite a pattern, but was heading toward one. Dinners, gallery visits, 2 evenings where she came to my apartment, and we sat at my kitchen table going through photography books from my shelves, while she asked questions that made me look at images I'd seen 100 times with different eyes. One afternoon, where she took me to see the city, building her company was restoring. She owned a hotel development firm, I learned, the resort being the flagship but not the only property, and walked me through the space while it was still bare concrete and raw timber, and described what she saw when she looked at an unfinished room. I see it finished, she said simply. I always have. Some people can only see what's there. I see what it can be. I thought about that later, alone in my apartment. About whether she looked at me that way. Nothing physical had happened between us beyond one moment, brief, charged, on the sidewalk after a dinner, when she had reached up and tucked a piece of my hair behind my ear with 2 fingers. A gesture so small and so deliberate that I had replayed it approximately 400 times. She was doing what she had said she would do, moving at whatever pace worked for me, giving me room. And I had room, more room than I'd had in years. Room to feel things without immediately filing them away. Room to be uncertain. Room to be in something new without already managing its end. It was around week 3 that I had dinner with my friend Clara. Clara had known me since college, had watched the Daniel years with increasing concern, had been quietly furious on my behalf when it ended, and was now sitting across from me at our usual wine bar with both her hands wrapped around her glass, looking at me with the particular expression of someone who is trying to assess news they haven't yet decided how to feel about. Tell me everything, she said, from the beginning. I told her about the Gala, about Daniel and the terrace and the voice from the heat lamp, about Margot. Clara listened. When I was done, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, She sounds terrifying. She's not terrifying. She sounds like someone who knows exactly what she wants and is very calm about getting it. Iris, that is terrifying, or it's just honest, or both. Clara sipped her wine. Are you okay? Like, genuinely, after Daniel, after the gala, after all of it. Are you actually okay? I thought about it. I think I'm the most okay I've been in a long time, I said. Clara looked at me for a long moment. Good, she said finally. That's good. Don't lose that. I'm trying not to. And this woman, she's treating you well? She treats me like I'm. I paused, trying to find the right word, like I'm worth being careful with, not fragile. Just worth care. Clara was quiet again. Then she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then let yourself have it, she said. Stop waiting for the catch. I was thinking about that conversation 2 days later when Margot called and asked if I wanted to come back to the mountain. There's no event, she said. The resort is quiet this time of year between major bookings. I have work to do there next week. I thought you might want to shoot. The mountain in late February has a different quality than the winter gala. Quieter. I think you'd find it interesting. Are you inviting me to photograph your mountain? I'm inviting you to photograph the mountain, she said. It's not mine. I just happen to own it. I went. The mountain without the gala was something else entirely. Without 200 people and warm light and champagne, just the stone and the snow and the bare winter trees and the silence that felt enormous and specific. I spent 3 days shooting, mostly outdoors, and they were some of the best 3 days of work I'd had in years. Margot worked during the day, meetings, calls, the constant quiet machinery of running a property empire, but we had the evenings. Dinner at the long wooden table in her private residence at the top of the resort, walks in the snow that lasted until the cold drove us back inside, and the library. The library was where she took me on the second evening. It was at the back of the residence, all dark paneling and tall shelves, and a fire that had clearly been kept burning because she kept it burning every night regardless of whether anyone was in there. Armchairs angled toward the fire, the kind of room that looked like it had absorbed 100 years of quiet evenings. We sat in the armchair chairs with books, and then without books, and then just talking. And it got late in the gradual way it does when you're comfortable somewhere. And at some point, I became aware of the fact that I was looking at her in the firelight and feeling something that I had been carefully not naming for 3 weeks. I want to be clear about what happened next. I was the one who moved, not dramatically. I set my book down on the side table and I looked at her and I said, "I'm going to tell you something. I'm telling you now instead of waiting, because I've been thinking about what you said on that first Wednesday about honesty." She was watching me, that full, still attention. "I want to kiss you," I said. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. Something that had been very carefully contained shifted slightly. "Then kiss me," she said. And I leaned across the space between the chairs and I kissed her. It was not an accidental kiss, not tentative, not the uncertain first kiss of someone testing ground. It was deliberate, and it was warm, and it was hers the moment she returned it. Because when Margot Voss kissed back, she did it with the same focused completeness she brought to everything. Like she'd been waiting and was glad to stop waiting. And now that the waiting was over, there was no further need for restraint. We stayed in that library for a long time after that. The fire burned down to embers. Outside the window, the mountain was dark and still and covered in snow. For a while, everything was exactly what I hadn't let myself believe in. We settled into something real, not a fairy tale, better than that. The kind of real that includes sticks of two lives making room for each other. She came to the city more frequently. I went to the mountain. We developed the small rhythms of two people choosing to be in each other's lives. The texts that were practical, and the ones that were just thinking of you, the dinners that were special, and the ones that were just dinner. The way her coat ended up over the back of my kitchen chair and stayed there between visits like a presence. I was happy. I want to say that plainly and without hedging. I was happy in a way that felt earned, not just received, like I had built something, not just stumbled into it. The problem came from a direction I hadn't been watching. Her name was Eloise's, and she had been Margot's business partner for 9 years before she became something else, briefly, and then became the person who was still technically co-invested in 3 of Margot's development projects, and who had opinions about what Margot's life should look like. I met her at a dinner in the city. A professional event, industry people, the kind of thing Margot attended in her role as someone significant in the hospitality and development world. She had asked me to come. Eloise was elegant, composed, and 2 glasses of wine into the evening. She found me by the windows during a gap between conversations and introduced herself with a smile that was warm in the surface and something else underneath. We talked about my photography. Pleasant, professional. Then she said with a kind of casual precision, "Margot has always been attracted to things she can protect. Beautiful things in need of repair. It's very generous of her." She said it like a compliment. I recognized it as a map. I kept my face pleasant, and the conversation moved on, and I filed it away in the part of my mind where I kept things I wasn't ready to process yet. That night, in the car going home, Margot was quiet in the way she got when she was managing something internally. I didn't push. We said goodnight at the door, and she squeezed my hand before she left, and I stood in my apartment and thought about what Eloise had said. Beautiful things in need of repair. Is that what I was to her? The question once asked was hard to unask. I thought about the terrace, the coffee appearing without question, the way she had stepped in with Daniel, the deliberate pace, the careful containment of herself until I moved first. Had any of it been about me, or had it been about someone she had found in a distressed state and decided to tend to? I knew rationally that this was old noise. I knew it was Daniel's voice in my head, the years of feeling like a convenience rather than a choice, making me read the world through the filter of someone who can't be chosen for her own sake. But I couldn't turn it off. I pulled back. Not dramatically. I didn't disappear, didn't start arguments, didn't manufacture conflict. I just became slightly more careful, a little more managed, a little less present. Margot noticed within 4 days. We were on the phone, a regular evening call, routine by now, and there was a pause, and she said, "Something's different." Not asking. Noting, "I'm fine," I said, the standard lie, the one that means the opposite, the one that means the opposite. Then Iris. "I'm not going to pretend I don't notice, but I also won't push tonight. Tell me when you're ready." And she didn't push, which should have been reassuring and instead made something worse. Because it was so exactly what she'd promised and what I'd needed, and I didn't know what to do with someone who kept their word. Clara called me that week. I told her what Eloise had said. Clara was quiet for a moment, then, "Do you actually believe that? Or are you just afraid?" "Both," I said honestly. "What if it's both? Then you need to talk to her," Clara said. "Because if it's true, you need to know. And if it's not true, and Iris, from everything you've told me, I don't think it is, then you're about to do the thing you always do. Make yourself smaller. Make yourself easier to lose." I sat with that for a long time. I called Margot the next morning. "I need to tell you something," I said. "I'm listening," she said. And I told her everything. What Eloise had said, what I'd thought, the old noise and where it came from, the fear of being a beautiful thing in need of repair rather than a person someone had chosen. Silence on the line. A long one. Then Margot said, "I need you to hear me carefully." "Okay." "I don't protect things," she said. "I'm not particularly gentle by nature. I run several businesses with the level of sentiment you'd apply to a surgical instrument. I do not have a history of taking in broken things. I have a history of not letting people close because it costs too much and the math doesn't work." She paused. "You," she said, "are the exception, not because you needed protecting. Because you were on a terrace pressing your hand into stone, and you made a sarcastic comment about masonry, and something about the way you looked at the snow while you were in pain made me want to stay next to you for a long time. That is not protection, that is preference. I chose you, specifically you. I was crying. Not breaking down, just quietly, the way feelings leak out when you finally let something land. Eloise," Margot said carefully, "has her own complex relationship with my life. We were briefly something that should never have been anything years ago, and she has not entirely made her peace with what came after. I should have warned you about her." "I'm sorry I didn't. I should have asked you instead of spiraling," I said. "Yes, we'll both do better." A pause. Then with something that was not quite humor but was adjacent to it. "Are you done being afraid?" "Probably not," I said honestly. "But I'm done letting it make my decisions. That," she said, "is good enough. That conversation, that one conversation. I need you to hear how important those kinds of conversations are. The ones where, instead of retreating, you say the thing. Where instead of managing the fear alone, you trust someone with it. We're heading into the final stretch of this story now, and I promise, what comes next is the part that earned all the pages before it. If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, please do. It's free, and it genuinely helps this story reach the people who need it. And if this story is reminding you of someone you've been overthinking about, maybe drop them a message tonight. Now, let's finish this. 3 months after that phone call, Margot asked me back to the mountain, not for an event, not for work. For the first week of May, when the last of the winter snow would be giving way, and the mountain would be in that in-between state she said was her favorite. When the trees started coming back, when the air had that particular quality of something ending and something beginning at the same time. I said yes, I took the week off from everything. Left the city on a Sunday morning with my camera gear and a bag packed for 5 days, and drove up the mountain road with the windows down, even though it was still cold, because the air smelled like pine and wet earth and something opening. Margot met me in the entrance. The resort was quiet. Two other guests, apparently, in the far east wing, but otherwise the whole enormous place was still and ours. She had planned nothing formal. Just the mountain. Long walks every morning, work in the afternoons, evenings with no agenda. We cooked actual meals in her kitchen, something I hadn't done with anyone in a long time, and she was characteristically precise about it, methodical. She didn't cook the way most people cook, with improvisation and instinct. She cooked like she did everything, with intention, every step considered. We talked more that week than we had in months combined. Not about anything important, sometimes. About her childhood in this same resort, running through hallways while her parents hosted events, learning the building the way other children learned backyards. About the summer she spent in Italy after university, before she came back to take on the business. About what she had wanted to be before she became what she was. "What did you want?" I asked one evening. We were in the library again. Always the library eventually. She was quiet for a moment. "I wanted to make things that lasted," she said. "Not just buildings. Actual things. Things people came back to. That held meaning over resorts. Among other things." She looked at me steadily. "I'm starting to think that includes people." On the last evening, it rained. Not snow, rain, proper spring rain, the kind that changes the smell of everything. We had been outside earlier and come back damp, and the fire in the library was burning high, and we were sitting together on the rug instead of in the chairs, because at some point in the last hour we had ended up there and hadn't moved. I was looking at the fire and thinking about the fact that this was the last evening, that tomorrow I drove back down and back to the city and the regular life, and I was trying to hold the feeling of the week, the extraordinary, ordinary, unrepeatable feeling of it, before it became memory. I, I want to tell you something, Margot said. She was very close. I could feel the warmth of her arm against mine. "Okay," I said. She said, "You have made everything else harder to inhabit." I turned to look at her. "Meaning," she said with that precise, careful voice, "that before this my life had a quality of sufficiency. It was functional, good. I had built it carefully and it served me. And now," she paused. "Now when you're not in a room I notice it. I have never particularly noticed the absence of things before. I notice yours." 11 words. "You have made everything else harder to inhabit." I had promised myself I would tell you when we got here. There it is. I want you to understand what those 11 words meant to me in that moment. Not "I love you," not "you're beautiful," not "I want you to stay." Just the plain, precise Margot Voss truth of it. I had changed the texture of her life by being in it. Her carefully ordered, self-sufficient, more than adequate life was now harder to be in without me. Not because I had fixed something or filled a gap or repaired something broken. Because I was specifically me, and she had specifically noticed. After everything with Daniel, after 2 years of making myself easy, making myself useful, making myself quiet, to be told that simply being present had changed someone's experience of their own life. I reached up and put my hand against her face. She turned into it, eyes closing for just a moment. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "I know," she said. "I'm aware that's not the problem I'm describing." "I know," I said. "I just wanted to say it anyway." I kissed her. She kissed me back with both hands in my hair, and the rain on the windows and the fire going warm beside us, and the mountain holding everything still, and I thought, clearly without fear, without management or calculation, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because I had been placed there, not because someone had saved me, because I had gotten in a dented rental car and driven up a mountain and pressed my hand against cold stone and let someone see me, because she had stayed, because I had called, because we had both kept choosing. I drove down the mountain in my dented rental car, a different one this time, same size, same slightly apologetic presence in the Voss Peak parking lot, with the windows down and the spring air running through everything. I was different from the person who had driven up 4 months earlier. Not transformed, not fixed, not saved, just, more accurately, myself. There's a difference, I think, between being repaired and being seen. Repair implies something was broken, implies someone came with tools and patience and set things right. It's a kind one-way street. Being seen is different. Being seen says, here is a person, whole even in their disarray, worth looking at carefully, worth the full attention. Margot had never repaired me. She had never tried to. She had just looked at me, clearly, consistently, without reducing me to something easier to manage. And in being looked at that way, I had started to look at myself the same way. I went back to the city and I worked. Good work, focused work, the best sustained period of my professional life. I started a long-term project I'd been thinking about for 2 years and never started, a series on working people in winter cities, the kind of photographs I wanted to make, true ones, honest ones. Margot and I found our rhythm. She was in the city more often than not, which I understood was a shift for her. She usually wintered at the mountain. She didn't announce it as a sacrifice. She just started being there. We went to Clara's birthday dinner. Clara took one look at Margot, who arrived on time, shook her hand, and asked her a genuine question about the arts program she ran. And afterward in the kitchen said simply to me, "Okay, yes, good." We went back to the mountain in July when the snow was gone and the slopes were green and the resort ran as a summer for hikers and the kind of people who wanted somewhere quiet and beautiful. I photographed it differently than winter, lighter, more open. Margot walked beside me one afternoon on a trail that switchbacked up the eastern face. And at the top, we sat on a flat rock overlooking the valley below, and she pointed out landmarks the way someone does when they've loved a view for long enough that it has a history rather than just a geography. "That line of trees," she said, pointing. "That's where my father taught me to ski. I was 6. He said, start small, go slow, and the mountain will teach you the rest." He was right about most things. "He sounds like you," I said. She looked at me sideways. "He was," she said quietly. "Very much." I took her hand. She held it with that same deliberate gentleness she brought to things she considered important. We sat there for a long time. The valley below went amber and then rose as the sun moved, and the mountain was very quiet, and I thought, this is what I wanted. Not this exact scene or this exact person necessarily, but this feeling of being somewhere that fits, of being with someone who holds you the way the mountain holds itself, completely, without apology, permanently. I didn't say any of that. I just held her hand and looked at the valley, and she held mine back. We're almost at the end of Iris and Margot's story, but before the final chapter, I want to ask you something. Has anyone ever looked at you the way Margot looked at Iris? Not to fix you, not to use you, not to need you, just to see you. If you know someone who needs to hear this story tonight, the message about being seen, about being worth someone's full attention, share this video with them. Right now. It costs you nothing, and it might mean everything. And if you're watching this alone and this story is landing somewhere real, leave a comment. Tell me what sentence got you. Tell me you're here. This channel exists because of every single one of you who stays until the end. Now, the last chapter, 1 year. 1 year after I drove up the mountain in a dented rental car as the replacement photographer, arrived at the service entrance with a bag over my shoulder and pride that was doing its level best, and stood on a freezing terrace pressing my hand into stone. Margot asked me to come to the gala again. Not as the photographer this time, as her guest. I want to tell you about that evening because it mattered. We drove up together. I was in the passenger seat of her car. The car was a dark, understated thing that was clearly expensive and equally clearly not meant to announce itself. And the mountain road was the same, and the trees were the same, and the torches were lit at the entrance, and everything looked exactly as it had 12 months ago. But I arrived through the front entrance this time, with Margot, with her hand at the small of my back as we walked in, a gesture so private and present that I felt it the whole evening. The resort was exactly as beautiful as I remembered. The ballroom with the firelight and the tall east windows. The warm gold light against the cold dark outside. 200 of the most expensive people in the country, laughing and clinking glasses and looking beautiful. And me, not invisible this time. Not camera up, moving through the room as a professional ghost. Just there, present myself. The Fentons were there. The couple I had photographed a year ago, the ones who had gotten engaged at the first gala, 34 years earlier now. Margot introduced us. Mr. Fenton shook my hand warmly. Mrs. Fenton said, "We've seen your photographs. The one Margot printed for the library, the ice lake at the exhibition. Wonderful." I looked at Margot. She met my eyes with that almost smile. She had put my photograph in her library. She hadn't told me. I filed that away with the business card, with "I believe you," with 11 words on a rainy night in May. Later in the evening, I found myself near the glass doors to the terrace. Old instinct, old habit. I pushed them open and stepped out. The cold was the same, the snow falling quiet and perfect. The mountain dark and enormous beyond the lit terrace. I stood at the stone railing. I put my hand on it. Both hands flat, cold stone, and I looked out at the mountain and I breathed. The door opened behind me. "You'll lose the hands if you keep that up," said Margot. Again, I turned around. She was standing under the heat lamp in a different black suit, this one with a thin line of silver at the lapel that I'd told her was good, and she'd said she was aware. She had her glass of something amber, still barely touched. She was watching me with those gray eyes. "I know," I said. Old habit. She crossed to me, stood beside me at the railing. We both looked out at the mountain. "Last year," she said, "you were standing here and I chose to stay. I want you to know that. I could have gone back inside. I chose to stay." "I know," I said. "I would make the same choice again," she said. "Every version of that night, every permutation of it, every single time." I looked at her. The snow was falling the way it had that night. Slowly, deliberately, like someone had designed it. The gala was warm and bright behind the glass. The mountain was enormous and dark and permanent beyond us. And Margot Voss was looking at me with those gray eyes that saw clearly and didn't pretend to see less. I stepped closer. "Thank you for staying," I said. She put her arm around me, not protective, not possessive, just warm, just present, just hers, and I leaned into it. "Thank you for pressing your hand into my railing," she said quietly. I laughed, actually laughed, standing in the snow. She held me closer. We stayed on the terrace longer than was sensible. The cold didn't matter. Nothing else was louder than the quiet. Iris was never broken. She was just unseen, and Margot didn't fix her. She simply looked, really looked, and refused to look away. Sometimes love isn't rescue. Sometimes it's recognition. Tell me in the comments, which line in this story hit you the hardest? And what would you have done, called after 8 days, or never called at all? If this story meant something to you, subscribe, leave a comment, share it with one person tonight. We're here every week. Another mountain, another storm, another woman who refuses to stay invisible. See you in the next one.